Setup's whether you've got the opportunity to start off on the right foot. Now, because the setup is foundational to everything that happens after that, which is the golf swing and then the result of the shot, it's important to get it right. And today we're going to have a look at some of the things that I see every day that are errors with setup that can be easily addressed. Yes, they may take a little bit of work to get used to be comfortable with and familiar with, but then once you do that, you'll find that the flow-on effect to your golf swing and to the resultant shots is going to be huge for your game. Hi, I'm Peter Knight, and I've created this channel, Peter Knight Golf, to help you play the best golf you can. Today we're going to have a look at setup and the killer things that you need to have sorted out for your game. What I typically find is that most players have one or more of these errors with setup. Hopefully you don't have to tick all 5 boxes and say I've got to fix all 5, but in the chance that you do, let's have a look and see what these 5 things are. So the first one, aside from holding the club correctly, you also need to monitor grip tension. So if I was going to, say, use a hammer, I wouldn't grip it with a death grip. I'm going to use my arm and my wrist is going to work freely, but I've got firm enough tension in my hands that I'm not going to let go of the hammer. That's pretty much what we want with the golf swing. So my fingers are closed, there's no looseness, no gaps in my fingers, but when I move the club back and through here, you can see that my motion is very, very light through my wrists and my forearms. So I need to retain that lightness in order for my body to be able to move nice and freely. So tip number 1, not too tight with the grip tension. The second 2 things relate to posture. The first of them is, and again, this is very, very common, when players set themselves up, they'll tend to be quite rounded. Now, when you do set up, we want the back to be relatively straight. Our spines aren't straight, but we're trying to get as close as we can to that. Now, a couple of ways of doing it. One is just to feel like you're standing nice and tall, and when you tilt forward from your hips rather than from your waist. Now, an exercise that exaggerates the movement a little bit, but a really good one to practice, is if I hold the club with the grip end of the club against my head, and I hold the bottom end of the shaft against my belt line, I can also feel contact with the middle of my back. Now you can instantly see that my body's a lot more upright than what it would normally be, and it's more upright than what I want with the golf swing. But the purpose of this drill is to give you the exaggerated feel. So from here, what I want to do is tilt forward again from my hip joints, and I'm not going to lose contact with any of those 3 points on my back. So I'm keeping contact with my head, my belt line, and the middle of my back. Now I won't be able to go forward very far before I start to feel a stretch through the backs of my legs, but that's fine. So tilt forward, and then from there I can just unlock my knees, and that'll take that pressure off the stretch through my legs. So when I set up, I can bring the club over and look to mimic that setup position so that my back is reasonably straight. Now, as well as the back, we also want to look at the alignment of the head and the spine. So when I set myself up, I don't want my head to drop, nor do I want to lift my head up. And you can see here even my voice changes as it stretches my throat. So when I'm setting myself up, I feel like I'm keeping my head back, and that'll help to further align the top part of my spine. The next point about address is what's happening with the knees. So when I set myself up, a good check for knee flex is that the front of my knee is about level with the end of my laces. So many players I'll see will set up with their legs locked. Now when you're moving, you've got to create a free motion through your knees. So we need to have some knee flex in order for the body to be able to move freely. So we're looking for like a softness through your ankles, through your knees and through your hips. And that requires that the knees are flexed. Now if my knees are bent too much, so let's say I set up and my knees are bent really a long way, that's putting quite a bit of stress on the top of my legs here, and I'm unlikely to be able to sustain that. The other thing is that the more I flex my knees, the more I'm going to have to balance that body mass wise by leaning over. And oftentimes, as I'm doing here now, we'll see quite a rounded setup. Very, very common. especially as golfers get a little bit older, they tend to do that a bit rather than keeping the back straighter. The spine does change over time, so it's just doing the best you can to try and keep the spine straight. The next thing we want to have a look at is stance width. And players will vary their stance enormously. They'll vary it from shot to shot, club to club, but also from one player to the next. Now, when you swing the club, as you swing back and through, your body's going to rotate. As you can see, my body mass is turning and then shifting and turning. So my body mass does have this sideways or lateral component. There's also like a slight vertical component where I've got pressure changing on my feet. Now, if I consider that sideways component, the lateral component, which I need to help me to develop power, if my stance is really narrow, then I don't have to move very far sideways, and all of a sudden I'm starting to compromise my balance. I'm moving out of my balance range. So if my feet are too close together, I either won't move very much or I'll be at risk of losing my balance. On the other hand, if my feet are too far apart, then when I try and get this lateral movement going in my swing, I'll really struggle to do that. So I might feel more solid and stable on the ground, but I can't really move. So it's going to restrict my rotation, and it's really going to restrict any lateral movement that I'm trying to get, which is going to help me to develop power. Now, a good compromise is that when I set myself up, the distance between my heels there is around about 35 centimeters, which is around about 14 inches. Now, it might vary a little bit from player to player, and it may get, about 5 centimeters or 2 inches wider with the driver. It's not going to go into like a massively wide stance with the driver, because we're still considering the same things about the body rotation and the body lateral movement, which we're going to need for all of those shots. So having the stance width about 35 centimeters at the heels, and both toes turned out just a little bit, because that's then going to help the movement through the ankles, through the knees, and through my hips. So those are the key things with actually setting your feet correctly at the start of the swing. The final thing that relates to ball position. Now, there are still two schools of thoughts on ball position about whether the ball should move with every single club. To be honest, I think that's too confusing. And the other thing too is I'm not standing on flat ground here creating this video, and neither will you be when you're on the golf course. You're going to have this combination of lies where one foot's higher than the other, the ball's above your feet or below your feet, or combinations of those things. So you're always allowing for differences in the terrain. It's not going to be level. What we want to do though is keep the ball a bit forward of center with pretty much every shot. So if we consider, say, a safe range for ball position. So when I set myself up, for most of my iron shots are going to be somewhere between a little forward of center and a little inside my left heel there. Now, yeah, it might change as the club gets longer. You might move it that tiny little bit forward, but still inside that range. When I get to driver, I want the ball to be somewhere between, say, my left heel, my front heel, and my big toe. If the ball's too far back in the stance, then that's going to affect the way the club moves to the ground. It's going to move too steeply, so it's affecting my angle of attack to the ball. So I'm not going to be able to launch the ball correctly, especially with driver. And final ball position, and I guess this is a bonus, when I'm playing really short shots around the greens, then my feet will be quite close together, then the ball will be in the middle. But for most of your shots, work on that, say, that 35 centimeter or 14 inches between the heels. So there you have it, 5 things that you can do related to posture, grip posture, ball position. And if you get those things right, that's going to set you up to be able to play a lot of really good shots. We could throw in an extra one, which is make sure you're lined up straight. And the best way to do that is to pick an intermediate target. Now, once you've got yourself set correctly, if you then want to be able to hit really good shots and want to know what should be happening at impact as the club meets the ball on the ground, then you can click the link in the description below, download the free videos where I describe those things and how to achieve them.